Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Meridian, for convening this critical conversation. Africa is no longer emerging in the global space conversation. It is actively shaping it. We're looking at a sector exceeding $22 billion on the continent. The real story here isn't the number, it is the shift. From consumption to sovereignty, from participation to positioning, African governments, engineers, entrepreneurs, and a diaspora serving as a bridge, connecting talent, capital, and market across borders. Who builds, who benefits, and who leads will determine whether this ecosystem becomes truly innovative. For the continent and for the global partners, we will be talking today with our esteemed lineup of speakers today to look and explore at what it looks like in practice. We're pleased today to be joined by Dr. Zolana João, who's built Angola's national space program and is leading the continent's most consequential regional satellite effort. We also have Rama Afullo, AI-driven satellite infrastructure leader, scaling technology across demanding commercial environments. And we also have Petit, with nearly 2 decades of U.S. foreign policy and national security experience and significant time on African affairs at state and the National Security Council. Welcome, everyone. From where you sit, what are the most compelling opportunities right now, and where do you see international partnerships generally supporting Africa's space ambitions? That would be for you, Doctor.
For me?
Yes.
Sorry. Hi, all, and thank you, Meridian. I'm so sorry if I'm a little bit slow. I was stuck in Houston due to partial government shutdown. I don't want to tell the rest of the story. So I'm still trying to recover. No, Nneka, thank you so much for the question. I always say, and based on my experience, that we have to tackle the real problems of the continent. There are plenty, but there are at least 3 that is common for the 55 countries in the continent. First of all, connectivity. Out of 1.4 billion Africans, 800 million of them are not connected to the internet. That's scary. It means whatever policy we do in Africa, especially in the era of digital transformation, 4th industrial revolution, at least we're saying that 38% of people, only those can access to this. The second one, very quickly, has to do with 60% of Africans, they depend on agriculture to survive. When we have problem with drought, and other climate challenges, they are affected. And the third one, Africa still holds the 30% of land, world land, and natural resources. So if you want to work with Africa or develop any space cooperation and you are not tackling 3 of these things, you are missing out. I think the opportunities are where the big challenges are. For instance, I think Starlink was very smart on seeing this problem. They have one of the largest connectivity satellite network in the world for these reasons. I believe, truly, just to finalize to your question, we have to focus where the problems are. Normally, I see people focus on technology. We should be focusing on impact. Doesn't matter if you're just sending satellites out there, but if you're not making impact, it will be a challenge to have any type of opportunities there. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt, any thoughts?
You're seeing me nod my head a lot because I agree with the doctor on every single point here. I recently published a paper with the Atlantic Council with my former National Security Council colleague and current Vice President at Vannevar, Maureen Farrell, where we argue from the U.S. side, now there is absolutely an explicit strategic imperative to engage with Africa on space issues. Now, from the U.S. policy perspective, the frame right now is competition with China. To put things in less diplomatic terms, China's cleaning our clock diplomatically in Africa. You're seeing them handing over ground stations that they built 25 years ago. Windhoek just had an Earth observation station handed over just a few weeks ago. You're seeing them helping bring in African space agencies to help with their ILRS mission. You're seeing training and other opportunities across the continent that, even though our esteemed guests from the last panel talked about, we are not able to keep up with. Now, where the US government, or I'd say the United States, has a comparative advantage is the commercial space sector. China's commercial space sector is nowhere near the capability in commercial satellite arrays. It doesn't have the same launch capabilities. The United States and allied partners all over the world have better infrastructure, better talent, and better technology right now. That can be offered to Africa in more equitable arrangements that get to what Dr. João is talking about. African countries right now have an extremely poignant and perfect moments to exercise their agency and their sovereignty. I worked at the White House, and I know there are a lot of times when we as policy professionals would come in and say, well, we want to do this, and then we close our ears for the other part of the conversation. But I think right now, to get to these strategic imperatives that the United States wants, we have to think about what African partners need. And they have strategic and sovereign needs. They're agricultural development. They are monitoring flood. They are monitoring climate resilience. They're monitoring migration, counterterrorism flows, things that they care about and that are significant existential threats to their people. So how do we structure contracts, equitable arrangements that not only give them maybe finished technology or products that gets to their use, that they control, that don't cost millions of dollars and have strings attached? And how do we also help build out the infrastructure around some of these things? We used to, in Africa, have uplink stations, Earth observation stations, ground stations, launch capability, monitoring stations across the continent. Virtually none of that remains. But now there's the opportunity through equitable arrangements with African partners, with companies, startups, with governments who are willing to, wanting to work with our commercial sector to do so. It's a win-win, and I think it's one that American ingenuity can really win out at. Thank you.
Thanks, Rama.
That's kind of a tough follow-up, right? After those two answers, I think most things are covered there, and I'll give you, I think, a different perspective. So on my end, I'm turning 34 years old next week, and I've spent 27 of my 34 years living across 3 African countries, right? So I'm originally from Kenya, then lived in Botswana, and finally lived in South Africa before doing a stint in the Netherlands and Ireland and moving to America 5 years ago. So I consider myself a Kenyan American, and one of the things that would be interesting in the future is that I don't have to, another Rama does not have to come to America in order to feel that they can create a real commercial space company, right? And so, like, getting folks to understand the repercussions of what space means to us here terrestrially is super important, and also getting African countries and African leaders, African space agencies, and actually the African Space Agency also, to really invest across the African space. I think that changes the game in terms of how brilliant folks from the continent actually want to engage in the space sector, how they see what the actual effects of the space industry are, but also downstream of that. So I think that's much needed. It shouldn't be the case that in order for me to get to a place where I'm starting to get globally recognized for the work that we're doing in virtual data centers in space, that I have to actually leave the continent to do that, right? And I think that's one thing that gives me a lot of pause. There's a lot of luck involved in life in general. Lots of opportunities are out there for certain folks. And for us, we just want to make sure that more and more Africans get lucky.
Thank you for that. I want to go a little bit deeper so that the opportunity is well understood. What we talk about less is the architecture behind those partnerships and how we can move forward together. For international partners engaging Africa's space sector, what models, policy signals, or local strategies have proven most effective in building trust and reducing barriers, while ensuring African institutions retain leadership, ownership, and long-term value in what gets built?
Yeah, great question, Nneka. I remember when we started the space program in Angola, definitely we didn't know what we were doing. I hope I'm not live here. So we just discovered when we had our first orbital satellite. Because the formula, empirical formula that I can share with my experience, first you need to buy something. This is the first rule. If you want really to engage in trust to build a space program, you need to buy something. Of course, not randomly. Look at your space policy if you have your national development strategy of the country. If you are focused on big production in coffee, focus about developing a small satellite to map coffee in your country. And then you learn that this is hard as well, right? It's not fun. Then second, I think now you need to co-develop, right? What I mean by co-develop, you need to learn the language. I remember when we had our first orbital failure of the big satellite, 200 million satellite. And it took four years and 9 seconds for me to realize that was not an easy game. I went to submit my resignation, and that time the government says, Zolana, fix this. And I said, I'm going to fix this. I don't know. I came back to US while managing the space program, and I came to learn the language. The challenge why we don't have effective cooperations, we don't talk the same language, right? Sometimes we think we know, but we don't know, right? And once we co-develop with the training, capacity building, and hardware, we will understand with the language. Then the third stage, we can talk about policy. It's not a good idea to start designing policies that you don't understand. And unfortunately, in Africa, we still have some basic challenge, and we need to fill this gap. These are the 3 steps I would summarize if we really want to make cooperation with Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. João. Matt?
I promise we didn't plan this ahead of time. But again, I'm finding myself agreeing with the doctor here. I think speaking the same language also means understanding what each company needs. And again, we're talking about the points of leverage for African countries here. Not only do they understand what they need and hopefully are speaking for their citizens, but now is the opportunity to look and see where the United States is looking for partnerships. So finding the vocabulary to speak that language. And I talked a little bit about competition with China, but it is really a little bit more peculiar than that. It is more bifurcated. There's not only the physical space of which ground stations from Africa are going to help China see over. Half of the world would be blind without these ground stations in Africa, supplemented by very expensive ship-borne capabilities. But there's also things in the ground. Now, we've talked a lot about critical minerals over the past few months, and a lot of that talk has been, frankly, exploitative. That's the American language. That's the language that we've been using for a long time to deal with this. But what is a way that we can talk about critical minerals in an African language? So yes, the United States needs these space companies need them for advanced metals and solutions, so they need Africa, they're leveraged there. But what African countries need is the talent, the ability, the beneficiation to bring those back into their communities so they're not just taken out and then never seen from again. So I think, to the doctor's point, how do we speak the same language? We have to get down in the weeds, meet each other on each other's terms. To Rama's points, to be across those continental divides, to go there to do the hard-nosed diplomacy, make mistakes, come back yet again, do it again. So it's great to talk about policy, but I think to speak the same language, we need to be in the same rooms, the same restaurants, and the same communities.
Thank you. Rama?
Wait, this idea of following these two is a terrible one, just in general. So I'm sorry, that wasn't very diplomatic. I'm a Silicon Valley tech founder, so diplomacy is not really our thing. I would say that I haven't often looked at this from an international collaboration point of view, right? I think you get a very myopic point of view when you're founding a company and trying to drill down into what it is you want for your company, what you want to achieve, right? I think one of the key tenets of what we're trying to achieve is an element of data sovereignty, all right, across the African continent. And that's something that's been on the lips of a lot of folks. I love seeing folks like Dr. João actually doing the thing, right? That gives us a lot of hope. And I love to hear people like Matt just being able to actually understand that the way we've been spoken to in Africa for a long time is just exploitative, one of those two, right? Rather than collaborative, right? And seeing that change is super useful. It gives people a lot of hope. And I think that's where you start, right? Because inherently, human beings all over the world are the same, and they will give you the same problems, right? If you talk to them on a one-on-one basis, right? They've got the same basic needs. And if you group humans together and start to partner with them and enable them and talk to them in a way that they're your equal, you see the results. You end up with really, really amazing results. And I think for us, for me, like one of the things that made me resonate with the two biggest early partners for us, those two big partners were the Kenyan Space Agency and NASA, right? And the reason they were like big partners of ours, even though we're a commercial entity, is because they didn't see us as a nobody just starting off. They took our ideas seriously, right? They treated us the same as everyone else, and we're one of only 47 companies that won a NASA STTR grant last year. So that sort of thing, I think, gives a lot of people hope. I can't even begin to tell you what my inbox looks like from a lot of African entrepreneurs who want to build a space company, who've never even thought that it was possible, right? But have really solid ideas that are out there. And if we can partner with people who really want to enable that, if space agencies take their commercial entities seriously, right? Take their entrepreneurs seriously, like that makes such a big impact, right? People start to see different opportunities out there, right? And that for me is what partnership means to me, right? But I won't pretend to speak the rest of the diplomatic language, but I think you catch my drift.
Thank you, Rama. Private companies are expanding their presence and the cost of space. Infrastructure remains still very high. Rama, I'm going to go back to you so that you don't have to follow your other colleagues. Satlyt has been locally grounded and built to compete globally. What does it take to scale that model? And what are the key challenges in making commercial space capabilities that are African-led but internationally connected? From your experience in SpaceX, Tesla, Google, what are some lessons that translate well, and where does the context require a fundamentally different approach?
Ooh, sure. Firstly, my CTO is also a Kenyan American. I think he's in the back room somewhere. His name is Nelson Msenjan. Awesome. When you talk about what it takes, the first thing is having a great team, right? In fact, we're Delaware, US Delaware C Corp, but we've also got a Kenyan subsidiary in Nairobi, and we've got a couple of engineers there. Of course, even within our own company, we've got to observe ITA arms regulations and keep some really talented engineers away from things because they don't have the right papers, right? So that's always a little bit of a tricky balancing act, but we want to make sure that we're not a company that dies because of some paperwork, that we're a company that dies because we suck, right? So we need to be at least be given the chance to do that. So for us, we're very much, we've got this Africa-US fusion going on that's been super interesting for us to sort of look out there and figure things out. And for me, I guess my experience, like I was the third employee of Tesla in Africa. And from there, I was able to actually see how like a US entity with an African subsidiary, like how they operate, right? And I saw the same thing at Google when I was working across the African ecosystem, and at SpaceX, once again, like working across both of those. So that's obviously been, like I said, there's a lot of luck involved here, but that's been very beneficial for us. So yeah, in terms of what it takes, I mean, you definitely don't treat folks in sort of some of the emerging nations the same way you would folks who have already been handed everything, right? There's definitely a different sense of grit and determination, right, that you've got to match, right? Before people take you seriously. Like, try doing a deal with someone in Nigeria without going out to Nigeria. I dare you, right? It's just, yeah, the chances are very slim, right? So that sort of thing is something that we've learned both the hard way and just through lots of experiences and at other people's expense, which has always been great.
Thank you. Dr. Zolana, Angola has been focused on policy, diplomacy, and technical development. What are the most transferable lessons for African nations in resource-constrained environments? Southern African Development Company, it's the group, the shared satellite project with 16 nations sharing internet, broadcasting, and remote data. What are the conditions that must be in place for it to succeed and actually attract sustained investment?
Oh my God, this is an essay when I have to do it. So, no, Nneka, it's a great question. It's just we're running out of time. I want to respect Matt as well, give some time to him. Very quickly, I believe, for instance, Angola, the way we started, I come from a very poor family. And I want to tie in to start closing because we're running out of time. The future is in Africa because when people are desperate to survive, they can do the impossible, right? When I come to US and I see a lot of my friends complaining about the price of ketchup, and I look at them and I say, what are you saying, right? So this grid was key and still key why the space program in Africa is growing. When the government discovered we're spending $30 million every month to rent foreign satellite, they came and say, Zolana, let's build our satellite. Within a year, which cost us $300 million, and we solved this problem. And this message resonated around the region. That's why they selected us to share a communication satellite for the region. This is what I've been sharing for 6 years. It's not easy. When it comes to policy, I think the rule of engagement is alignment. Because what I see a lot is sometimes you want to force people to do something that you only see on your perspective, but you have to take time and understand why it's looking that direction. Luckily, after 6 years, we have now a regional beam ready to launch a satellite. In terms of trust for why people would finance a project like that, Southern Africa is almost 400 million people. It's a large market. There's a lot of opportunity. But let me save some time here to Matt. There's so much that I can say, but let's save some time to Matt. Thank you so much.
Matt, what are the most important considerations for U.S. and international actors who want to engage constructively with African space programs?
Yeah, I would say to both the point of the gentleman on the stage here, go there, go there. I spent 4 years in Zambia, so I know personally the value of being there, understanding what's happening, and seeing the grit and ingenuity that can be channeled into these sorts of things. I would say also know the tools that you're operating with here. I'm speaking perhaps in dire tones about what the United States government had lost in traditional forms of cooperation on space in Africa. But there are tools now that are being unleashed, developed in the last few years that can help finance, provide loans to, and support U.S. and aligned companies in making these types of investment and activities. We've heard from State Departments, Commerce Departments, Office of Space Commerce. There's also within the Department of Defense, the Office of Strategic Capital. There's the Development Finance Corporation that's had its mandate expanded to do things like this. The main investment over the past few years in Africa was in Angola, Zambia, DRC on critical minerals, but that's really what we've been pointing to for 3 years. It's time to get down there to meet people, to understand what is motivating them, and to do that. I'll tell you, after I wrote this paper, I only had one very small company come up to me and ask, okay, well, how do I do this? I don't think that that's acceptable.
Thank you, Matt. Well, thank you to each and all of our panelists today, and from all of you watching from around the globe. Africa's role in the global space ecosystem is not a future conversation. It is a present one. And the countries, companies, and partners who understand that, who show up with genuine commitment to locally led, mutually beneficial growth, are the ones who will help shape this ecosystem and what it will become. The question is no longer whether Africa will be central to the space economy. It is on what terms and with whom. Thank you, everyone, for attending this panel. And for those who want to continue this conversation, I'll be hosting a small convening tomorrow here in Washington, focused on diaspora talent, commercial partnership, and I'll be glad to connect with anyone interested afterward. Thank you so much, and thank you, Meridian, for hosting this.